Why was everyone laughing at her? The insult had cut through the dry, salty air of the firing range like a blade. "You can hold the spotter scope, Grandma. Try not to drop it." A joke, delivered loudly enough for the entire group of SEAL candidates to hear. They were young, broad-shouldered, and full of sun-bleached confidence, and they laughed in unison, a pack feeding on itself. Didn't flinch. Late 40s, hair streaked with gray, her uniform a size too large, she stood in the middle of their circle and let the mockery hang unanswered. Her silence seemed to confirm their view, that she was nothing but a paper pusher, a bureaucrat shuffled in to check boxes. Lieutenant Commander Blackwood, the one who had delivered the insult, straightened his tall frame and smirked. He was their leader, chiseled and charismatic, the kind of man who filled a room with his certainty. To him wasn't a fellow warrior. She was a relic, a mother figure misplaced in a world of predators. But she knew something they didn't. She wasn't here to shuffle papers. She wasn't even here to train them. She was here under deep cover, tasked with evaluating the sniper program she herself had designed years earlier. Her entire presence, quiet, administrative, invisible, was camouflage. She bent down and lifted the heavy Mark V HD spotting scope. Her hands were steady, her movements smooth. No wasted motion, no hesitation. She braced it against the tripod with the grace of a woman who had done this for decades. Still, the SEALs snickered. From across the range, Master Sergeant James narrowed his eyes. He had survived 4 decades of combat, and he recognized the truth no one else saw. The way her stance rooted into the earth, the way her fingers didn't search for the focus knob they knew, the way her gaze flickered, absorbing air currents, dust patterns, mirages bending heat. His gut tightened. These kids thought she was nobody, but he knew better. She was a ghost. Blackwood, oblivious, began lecturing his team about wind shear effect and spin drift, his voice inflated with the self-importance of a preacher. He gestured vaguely toward when he said, "This isn't something you learn from a book, ma'am. This takes instinct." The younger SEALs nodded, walling her out, their silence a sharper insult than his words. But wasn't listening. She had stepped into another world, a private, quiet space where only the environment mattered. She didn't need charts or gadgets. She felt the air shift against her skin. She read the bend of wild grass. She understood heat ripples as if they were words. The numbers Blackwood relied on still chained him. She had moved past numbers long ago. She had become something elemental, a living extension of physics itself. Her mind drifted, not away, but back. Back to the first time she had ever felt the wind's language. The memory rose as sharp as rifle oil in winter air. 17 years old, Iraq, the harsh sun hammering down as she lay flat against jagged rock, a Remington M24 pressed against her shoulder. She wasn't supposed to be here, not officially, but her father had pulled strings, placing her as a special observer near the forward command post. A convoy of Humvees moved slowly across the desert floor below. Inside, Delta Force operators scanned the horizon, cautious but exposed. She had been ordered to observe, nothing more. Then it happened. An RPG streaked from a hidden ravine, smashing into the lead Humvee. Fire. Smoke. Gunfire erupted. 12 attackers poured lead into the pinned convoy. She saw Lieutenant Frank, younger than, not yet the weathered Master Sergeant, fall wounded, blood staining his leg. Her radio crackled, "Hold position, QRF en route, 20 minutes. But knew the truth, they wouldn't last 5. Her pulse slowed. Distance, 870 yards. Wind gusting west, 12 meters per second. She didn't write anything down. She didn't need to. The math flowed through her veins. 1 breath, 5 shots. Each one landed with surgical precision. The RPG gunner fell. The machine gunner. 3 more fighters crumpled before the others even knew what had happened. The survivors froze, confusion tearing their confidence apart. Their leader, a man with a red scarf, barked frantic orders. His finger eased against the trigger. 1.2 seconds later, the bullet found him. The remaining fighters broke, fled. By the time the quick reaction force arrived, 18 minutes later, the Delta team was bloodied but alive. Leg bandaged, had formed a shaky perimeter, his men looking at each other with questions no one could answer. "Who took those shots?" the QRF commander asked. Squinted into the sun. "Guardian Angel." Later, when she was debriefed, the officers didn't believe her. 6 kills under combat pressure with crosswinds. Impossible. But her father had only said one thing: "She's a..." And that had been enough. Back at the memory dissolved as adjusted the spotting scope. The younger men laughed again. But they didn't see what saw. They didn't know what ghost she carried. Because the truth of story didn't begin on this range. It began on a snow-covered ranch in Montana. She was 8 years old the first time her father put a rifle in her hands. A .22, custom-built, its walnut stock polished like amber. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe. Snow 3 feet deep. Her small hands trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of something she didn't yet understand. Her father's voice was steady. "Shooting isn't about strength, it's about stillness. Find the space between heartbeats, that's where the shot lives." William was more than a father, he was legend. A sniper whose name was whispered in the Pentagon's corners, a man who had shaped Cold War doctrine with his rifle. 2, he was simply Dad. But he trained her not as a daughter, but as an heir. By 12, she was hitting steel at 600 yards. By 14, she could feel wind patterns with her eyes closed, her father blindfolding her and asking her to describe the currents by touch, sound, intuition. She became something even he hadn't fully predicted, not just skilled but instinctual, a natural extension of the bullet's journey. Her mother had died when she was 4, leaving father and daughter bound in a way few could understand. That bond carried a promise: she would never be underestimated again. And yet here she stood underestimated once more. Blackwood's voice rang out, dripping sarcasm. "This isn't a world for clerks, ma'am. Takes real instinct." The men chuckled. They saw a middle-aged woman. They saw gray in her hair. They didn't see the girl who once lay in Iraq's sun, the teenager who saved a convoy with 6 perfect shots. They didn't see the 8-year-old who had been taught to find the space between heartbeats. But saw, and in that moment his gut told him something the others would soon learn. They were mocking a ghost. And ghosts had a way of teaching lessons the living never forgot. Why was Master Sergeant staring at her like that? The young SEALs hadn't noticed. They were still nodding along to Blackwood's lecture, feeding on his bravado. But's weathered eyes, sharp, unblinking, were locked on her. He had seen something. Something he wasn't ready to say aloud. Blackwood raised his voice, pointing to the mock village downrange. "The ghost scenario," he declared, as if unveiling a secret. "Final test. Impossible winds, hidden threats. This isn't math. This is instinct." The men nodded, their loyalty clinging to him like armor. And yet the irony was cruel, because the ghost scenario, the exercise Blackwood as legend, had designed it 10 years earlier. She stayed silent, she always had. Let them underestimate her, let them laugh. The time would come when silence would become its own weapon. Blackwood turned back to her, his voice dripping with mock civility. "Of course, ma'am, you wouldn't know much about this world. Not really." For a moment the desert heat seemed to fade. The smell of dust, oil, and cordite carried her somewhere else. Another time, another valley. The Hindu Kush, Afghanistan. The night was green through her scope, every ridge line a ghostly outline under night vision. SEAL Team 6 crept through the ravine below, silent shadows unaware they were already prey. 30 Taliban fighters surrounded the village ahead, RPGs and machine guns hidden in perfect positions. She counted them one by one. They had no idea. The Americans were walking into slaughter. Her spotter whispered, "We've got to warn them." She shook her head. "Comms are jammed." "Then they're dead." "Not yet." Her rifle, the M4A3, was steady in her hands. Distance, 2,200 meters, an impossible shot for most. For her, it was a challenge she embraced with the quiet certainty of instinct. She adjusted, calculating bullet drop, wind shifts, even the subtle tug of the Earth's rotation. Her first shot found its mark, the commander. Before his body hit the floor, her second round took out his comms operator. Then the RPG gunners, the machine gun teams. Each shot a new calculation, a new adaptation to shifting winds. 12 shots, 12 kills. By the time the SEALs reached the village, the survivors had already fled. Harrison, their commander, never understood what saved them that night. Only later did he hear the call sign whispered across the net, Ghost 7. She blinked, the memory dissolving into heat waves rising from the range. Her hand still rested calmly on the spotting scope. The men still laughed around her. Only kept watching. And then, in front of everyone, he broke the silence. "Chief Warrant Officer," he said, his gravel voice loud enough for all to hear. "It's an honor having you here today." The laughter died instantly. Blackwood frowned, confused. "We're in the middle of a briefing, Master Sergeant." Ignored him. His eyes were still fixed on her. "If I'm not mistaken, you served with Task Force 88 in Afghanistan, ma'am." Silence rippled across the line of SEAL candidates. Task Force 88. Officially, it didn't exist. Only those who had been in the shadows knew its name. Her eyes met, calm, guarded. "That was a long time ago, Master Sergeant." "Not that long," he countered. "I believe we crossed paths once. Hindu Kush 2002. Confusion cracked through Blackwood's mask of confidence. He looked from two, the first flicker of doubt in his eyes. "That can't be right," he muttered. "The ghost scenario, it was developed by a group sniper, a guy named." The weight of realization landed on him as the name left his lips. His smirk faltered. Remained still, her voice quiet, her expression unreadable. "Would you prefer I continue observing, Lieutenant Commander, or take a more active role in today's exercise?" The desert heat seemed to still. For the first time since she had walked onto the range, the young men looked at her differently. Blackwood opened his mouth, but no words came. And just like that, she had become something else in their eyes. Not an administrator, not a relic. Something they couldn't yet name. But knew. Ghost 7. That night in the barracks, whispers spread like wildfire. A story the men didn't understand. A woman who wasn't supposed to exist. A sniper whose name was never spoken on record. Some said she had dismantled an enemy unit single-handedly. Others swore she could read the wind by touch alone. Legends always grow in the retelling. But had never cared for legends. For her, it was never about fame, never about recognition. It had always been about something far quieter. Service. And yet, legends have a way of catching up to the living. She remembered her father's words, spoken on her 16th birthday when he placed a new rifle in her hands. "There will come a day when someone underestimates you because you're a woman. That will be your greatest advantage. Don't correct them, not until you're looking through your scope." At the day had come again, and this time the scope wasn't just a weapon, it was a mirror. It reflected the arrogance of a young lieutenant commander, the skepticism of his men, the recognition of a master sergeant who had once seen her save his life without revealing her name. And behind it all, the ghosts of her past waited, shadows she could never quite put down. Because the truth was more complicated than any legend. There were things she had done, shots she had taken, choices she had made. Things she had never told anyone. Not yet. And as the sun dipped lower over the range, casting long shadows across the mock village, one thought pressed against her mind with unrelenting weight. Secrets have a way of demanding their moment. And knew hers was coming. What happens when the best in the world fail? The firing range was quiet now, the laughter gone. The ghost scenario, the capstone exercise of SEAL sniper training, had chewed up every candidate and spat them out. One by one, teams had tried to beat it. One by one, they had failed. Targets still stood untouched downrange. A steel high-value figure in a mock village, its guards, its hidden layers of threat, all untouched. Lieutenant Commander Blackwood slammed his logbook to the gravel, his anger loud, theatrical. The wind's impossible, equipment's faulty. This scenario is broken. His voice echoed, desperate to fill the silence with excuses. But the truth hung heavier than the air itself. The best they had trained couldn't solve the problem. Master Sergeant called it, his voice cutting across the PA. Scenario terminated. All teams failed. The weight settled on the men's shoulders like stone. Elite operators humbled. Their silence was thick with frustration, shame, disbelief. Colonel Thomas descended from the observation tower. A full-bird colonel, broad-shouldered and calm, his very presence stripped the air of noise. He scanned the broken faces, the anger in Blackwood's eyes, and finally, the quiet figure at the edge of the line. "Chief," said. His voice was steady, deliberate. "Feel like showing these boys how the old guard gets it done." Every head turned. Blackwood's laugh was sharp, mocking. "No point, sir. Nobody could hit in this wind. Maybe she can file a weather complaint instead." The colonel ignored him. His eyes were on. She gave only a single nod. "Yes, sir." No bravado, no speech, just a decision. She didn't touch their sleek rifles, carbon fiber and precision tech. Instead, she walked to the edge of the line where an old Pelican case sat. Overlooked, forgotten. She opened it. Inside lay an M210 sniper rifle, heavy, older, a relic in their eyes. She assembled it with the ease of ritual, every movement smooth, deliberate. To her, it wasn't obsolete. It was memory, muscle, a part of her body. She ignored the wind meters the young men had obsessed over. Instead, she plucked a single blade of dry grass, held it up, watched it fall. Primitive, maybe, but her body already knew the truth the grass confirmed. She lay prone, her body aligning with the earth. Breath slowed, hands still. She wasn't just holding a rifle. She was disappearing into it, becoming part of the environment, part of the bullet's future path. Blackwood smirked, arms folded. "This is ridiculous." The men exchanged skeptical glances. The wind howled, unpredictable. Making one shot here would be luck. Making several was fantasy. Waited 30 seconds, a minute. She wasn't looking at the targets. She was watching the world. The shimmer of heat haze above rocks. The rhythm of a distant flag. The subtle dip in pressure she felt on her skin. And then she saw it. A pocket of calm. A fleeting corridor of still air. A window no one else could recognize. Her finger tightened. It wasn't one shot. It was 7. 7 rounds left the barrel so quickly, so precisely, they sounded like one tearing seam in the sky. Thump, 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 thump. Then silence. Seconds later, tink, 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 tink. Downrange, the impossible unfolded. The high-value target collapsed. Its rooftop guards fell. A driver inside a moving vehicle dropped. A hidden sniper one nobody had even spotted was hit through a window. A comms antenna shattered. And the last round, it struck a simulated explosive charge, erupting in a puff of red smoke. An entire enemy command unit neutralized in under 3 seconds. Silence drowned the range. Blackwood's jaw slackened, disbelief etched across his face. No, no way. Nobody shoots like that. Colonel stepped forward, calm, deliberate. His boots crunched against gravel as he approached Blackwood. A heavy hand landed on the younger man's shoulder. "Lieutenant," said softly, dangerously soft, "you are about to learn a very important lesson about making assumptions." He turned to an ensign nearby. "Pull up Chief Warrant Officer's file, unclassified portions only." The young officer's hands trembled as he scrolled through the tablet, his voice unsteady at first. then growing with each line he read. Name, rank, Chief Warrant Officer 5. The seals shifted. CW5, the highest possible warrant officer rank, reserved only for masters of their craft. Unit classified, formerly attached to Joint Special Operations Command, Task Force designation redacted. The air thickened. Everyone knew what that meant. Combat deployments, 17. Over 4,000 combat hours. Primary specialty, Special Operations Target Interdiction. Secondary, High-Angle Marksmanship Instructor, Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Group SEAL Team 6. The ensign's voice cracked. Awards, Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor, Distinguished Service Cross. Notation, holds the standing record for the longest confirmed kinetic strike in a combat zone. Distance, classified. The range went silent. The men looked at her differently now, not as a relic, not as a clerk, but as something beyond their understanding. Colonel let the silence work before he spoke again, his voice sharp as a blade. Lieutenant, the reason you found this course so difficult is because Chief designed it. 10 years ago. She wrote the book. She chose this time of year, this firing point, to teach you to stop worshiping your gadgets and start listening to the world. She is not here to observe you. She is here to show you what mastery looks like. He gestured at the old rifle resting in the dirt. That weapon, that's what she used one night in the Hindu Kush to dismantle a command cell from 2,200 meters. You call it a relic. She calls it part of her will. Turned back toward. She was already breaking the rifle down, methodical, calm, like nothing extraordinary had just happened. The colonel drew himself tall, shoulders squared, and saluted her. Not the quick, perfunctory salute of rank, but the slow, deliberate gesture reserved for heroes. "Ma'am," he said, his voice thickened with something beyond formality. "My apologies for the ignorance displayed here today. It will be corrected." Snapped to attention, his hand rising in salute. Then one by one, like falling dominoes, the younger SEALs followed. They weren't saluting a relic anymore. They were saluting a ghost. By nightfall, the story had spread beyond the range. It leapt from barracks to chow halls, whispered across fire bases, carried into bars where operators gathered. It grew with each telling, as legends do. They began to call her something. The ghost of. And for the young lieutenant commander whose arrogance had sparked it all, the lesson was already written into the steel of the targets she had felled. Don't underestimate the quiet ones. Don't mistake silence for weakness. And above all, don't ever forget the name. What does a man do when his pride has been shattered in front of his own men? For Lieutenant Commander Blackwood, the answer was simple. He burned. The barracks buzzed with whispers, the walls alive with a legend reborn. Ghost 7, the woman who had humiliated him on the range without ever raising her voice. The woman who had taken apart the impossible scenario like it was child's play. And everywhere Blackwood turned, he felt it. Eyes on him, doubt, quiet smirks, respect not for him but for her. For the first time in his career, he wasn't the story. Walked the base in silence, acknowledging no one, her steps steady, her face unreadable. She didn't need the whispers. She didn't need the recognition. For her, this was never about glory. It was about discipline, memory, the quiet weight of service. But Blackwood couldn't live in silence. His ego roared inside him like a wounded animal. He hated her, admired her, needed her. Late that night, he found her alone at the armory. The place smelled of oil and steel, rifles lined in racks like soldiers waiting for orders. She was cleaning her M210, each stroke of the cloth precise, reverent, the act of someone tending not to a weapon but to a memory. "You embarrassed me," Blackwood said. His voice cracked between accusation and confession. She didn't look up. "I didn't speak a word." "That's worse," he snapped. "You didn't even have to try, you just—" He broke off, his fists clenching. "What are you? Some ghost from the past they pulled out to make me look like a fool." Her hands paused, the silence stretched. Finally she lifted her eyes to him, calm, tired. "I'm what you might become if you survive long enough to lose your arrogance." The words landed like a strike. Blackwood's jaw tightened, but something flickered in his gaze. A crack, a hesitation. "You think you know me," he muttered. "You think you can teach me." Her cloth slid across the barrel one last time before she set the rifle down. She leaned back, her voice steady but softer now. "I don't think anything, I've seen it. Men like you, young, brilliant, unstoppable. Until they meet the first storm they can't control. Some break, some learn. Which one will you be?" The question hung in the air, heavier than any insult. For the first time, Blackwood didn't answer. He turned, storming out, but her words followed him like a shadow he couldn't shake. That night sleep eluded him. He saw her shots again and again, impossible, surgical, undeniable. He saw his men's faces, lit with awe for her, not him. He saw his own arrogance reflected back at him. And buried beneath it all, he saw the truth he wouldn't admit. He wanted what she had. Respect, mastery, a kind of strength that didn't need to be shouted. The next morning he found her on the range again, alone. The sky was pale with dawn, the air heavy with mist. She was lying prone, sighting on distant targets, firing in long, measured intervals. Not for records, not for glory, for discipline, for memory. He stood there uncertain, pride warring with desperation. Finally, the words slipped out. "Teach me." She didn't look up. "I already tried." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Not in front of them, not with an audience, just me. You know I have the skill, you saw it, but I'm missing something. And you," he stopped, forcing the words through clenched teeth. "You have it." For the first time she lowered her rifle, her gaze fixed on him, steady, searching. "What you're missing," she said, "is silence." He frowned. "Silence." "You can't hear the world if you're always filling it with your voice. You can't feel the wind if you're too busy proving you can control it. You can't lead men if you need them to worship you. Until you learn that, the rifle will own you, not the other way around." Blackwood's breath caught. Her words stung, but beneath the sting was something he hadn't expected: truth. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "Then show me how." For the first time since arriving allowed herself a small, almost invisible smile. Not of victory, not of pride, but of recognition. "Tomorrow," she said, 0400, bring no rifle, bring nothing at all." The next day, Blackwood obeyed. She led him beyond the range into the hills, where the air was cool and the earth still held the night's dampness. They climbed in silence, her pace relentless, her steps sure. She didn't look back to see if he followed. She knew he would. Hours passed, sweat soaked his uniform, his muscles burned. Still she pressed on. Finally, at the crest of a ridge, she stopped. The valley stretched below them, alive with wind currents, shifting fog, the distant shimmer of the ocean. "This is where you'll learn," she said. He looked around. "There's nothing here." She closed her eyes. "That's the point." She had him sit, had him close his eyes, had him listen. To the rustle of leaves, the rhythm of his breath, the way the wind shifted temperature as it rolled over ridges. At first he resisted, fidgeted, scoffed. But hours passed, and slowly something changed. He began to hear it, not just noise, patterns, whispers, a world alive, moving, speaking. By dusk his body ached, his pride stripped raw, but his eyes were different, less fire, more depth. When they descended back to base, he didn't speak, neither did she. But in the silence, something had shifted. Respect, fragile but real, had been born. Still knew the truth. Teaching him wasn't just about rifles or silence. It was about survival, because the ghosts of her past were stirring again. Whispers of an old enemy, a Russian marksman whose name had once haunted her files, a man who believed himself untouchable. And though she hadn't told anyone yet, knew his shadow was coming. And when he arrived, silence alone would not be enough. What happens when the ghosts you thought you'd buried begin to walk again? For the answer came in fragments, whispers in briefings, scraps of intercepted chatter, patterns only she could see. The name wasn't spoken yet, not directly, but she felt it. She hadn't spoken it aloud in years. A Russian sniper who once prowled the same shadows she had. Their paths had crossed in Chechnya, in Syria, in forgotten corners of Afghanistan where official records claimed no Americans had ever set foot. He was ruthless, patient, precise. Some said he was the only one who had ever come close to outmatching her. Others said he was her mirror, the darkness to her silence. And now, if the reports were right, he was hunting again. But she said nothing, not yet. Her life had settled into a quiet rhythm of training Blackwood. Each dawn they climbed ridges, sat in silence, let the wind and earth teach what no manual could. He fought it at first, chafed under her calm, but slowly, piece by piece, his edges softened. He began to listen more, speak less. He began to shoot not with arrogance but with patience. One afternoon, after hours on the range, Blackwood broke the silence. "Why me? You could train anyone. Why waste time on a man who insulted you?" She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed pressed to the scope, her voice calm. "Because the ones who fall hardest, if they choose to stand again, become the strongest. I've seen arrogance die. Sometimes what's left is worth saving." He frowned, unsettled. "You think I need saving?" She fired a round, the steel target ringing in the distance. Only then did she lower her rifle, her gaze meeting his. "I think we all do." The words hung between them, heavier than the rifle's weight. That night, alone in her quarters, sat with an old leather journal. Its pages were worn, corners curled from sand and sweat. She turned to the back where names were written in her precise hand. Some crossed out, some not. Wasn't crossed out. She closed the book, exhaling slowly. Outside, the world moved on, but inside, the past pressed in. She remembered Chechnya, winter of '99. Snow falling like ash, the air so cold it cracked skin. Her team had been tasked with neutralizing a rogue artillery commander. They moved through frozen villages, silence broken only by dogs barking in the distance. She had been the one behind the scope when she first felt him. Not saw, felt. A flicker in the pattern, a shift in the rhythm, the unmistakable knowledge of another predator watching. Then the first shot had come, not at her spotter. A clean strike through the throat, delivered from a distance she couldn't yet calculate. She had dragged her teammate into cover, scanning, searching, but the snow revealed nothing. Only later, when they exfiltrated, did she hear the name whispered by locals. He hadn't killed her that night. He'd let her live. And in the years that followed, their paths crossed again and again, always indirect, always a duel fought in shadows and echoes. She stopped him more than once. He escaped her more than once. It became something unspoken between them, not comrades, not enemies, something more dangerous, rivals. And now he was back. The first hard confirmation came in a classified briefing 2 weeks later. Sat in the back of the operations room, her face expressionless, while intelligence officers clicked through slides. "Unknown sniper activity," one analyst reported. "Eastern Europe, targets, NATO advisors, local resistance leaders, 5 confirmed kills, 200 meters minimum, often farther. Precision is consistent with a single operator." Another officer spoke. "We believe this is the same marksman responsible for interdictions in Syria and Ukraine. Russian origin, likely FSB trained. White Vulture." The name made Blackwood shift in his seat. "Never heard of him," he whispered. But's jaw tightened. She had heard many times. Her silence stretched. Her hands, folded neatly on the table, betrayed nothing, but inside her pulse ticked faster. When the briefing ended, Blackwood caught her in the hallway. "You know something, I saw your face." She shook her head. "You saw what you wanted to see." "Don't lie to me," he pressed. Not anymore. If I'm going to learn from you, I need the truth. Who is he? She stopped walking, her boots planted firm against the polished floor. She turned to him, her eyes sharp, her voice quiet. He's the reason I don't sleep. The words landed like a blow. Blackwood didn't push further. Not then, but the seed had been planted. That night, alone again, stared at the ceiling. The bass was quiet, distant waves rolling against the shore. She could almost hear another sound layered beneath it, the crack of a rifle echoing across a frozen valley. For years she had lived with silence. She had carried it like armor, like penance, but its name reopened wounds she had thought over. The next morning she returned to the hills with Blackwood. They lay prone, rifles steady, wind cutting sharp across the. She tried to teach as always, tried to focus, but the memory pressed in. Blackwood noticed, "You're somewhere else." She exhaled slowly. "Chechnya, winter, first time I knew he existed. He took my spotter that night. His name was Reed, good man, had 2 daughters. I still remember the sound of the shot. I remember the silence after." Blackwood stayed quiet, not mocking, not arrogant, just listening. She continued, "I should have taken him then, but he let me live, and I've been asking myself why ever since." The words cracked something in her voice, vulnerability she rarely let slip. Blackwood shifted, his tone softer than she had ever heard. "Maybe because he knew you were like him, maybe because he wanted the game to go on." Her eyes hardened. "This isn't a game." Silence stretched again, heavy with memory. And in that silence realized something. Training Blackwood wasn't just about shaping him. It was about preparing for what was coming, because wasn't just resurfacing. He was moving closer. And when he arrived, she would have to face him. Not just for herself, not just for the ghost she carried, but for every man and woman who would be in his crosshairs if she failed. The wind shifted across the ridge, cool against her cheek. She steadied her breathing, her rifle, her resolve. Because the silence that once sheltered her was breaking. And in the cracks, war was waiting. What happens when the hunter finally becomes the hunted? The orders came in silence. A sealed envelope slid across Colonel's desk. No briefing, no discussion. Opened it alone in his office. One glance at the blacked-out coordinates and the word interdiction told her everything. Yes. The official paperwork didn't use his name. It never did. It called him the operator. It spoke of destabilization in Eastern Europe, of assassinations designed to fracture alliances, of a single sniper whose work was as surgical as it was devastating. But didn't need the words. She already knew the signature, the spacing of the kills, the distances, the impossible wind corrections. She folded the papers carefully and set them back on the colonel's desk. "I'll take it," she said. Studied her, his expression unreadable. "You don't have to. You've already given enough." Her jaw tightened. No one else understands him. No one else will stop him. The colonel nodded slowly. He had seen this in her before, the quiet way she carried burdens no one else would touch. He didn't argue further. Later on the range, Blackwood sensed the shift immediately. His focus was sharper, her silence heavier. He studied her as they fired side by side, watching the way her hands lingered on the rifle, the way her eyes seemed somewhere far away. Finally he spoke, "It's him, isn't it?" She didn't answer. "You're leaving," he pressed. She lowered her rifle, her breath steady but her voice quiet. "There's something I need to finish." "Then take me with you," he said. The request startled her. For weeks she had seen his arrogance slowly unravel, replaced with something harder, humbler. But still, he was untested, raw in ways that would exploit. "This isn't training," she said. "This isn't an exercise you can fail and learn from. If you come, it's life or death." His gaze held hers. "Then let it be life or death." She wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed to keep him here, safe, unscarred. But the truth weighed heavier. She would need someone. And Blackwood, for all his flaws, had begun to understand silence. 4 a.m., she said finally. Be ready. The transport lifted into a cold European dawn, the roar of rotors beating against their helmets. The landscape below was fractured, forests broken by ruined villages, gray rivers cutting through frostbitten fields. Stared out the window, memories of Chechnya bleeding into the present. Snow, silence, shadows. The terrain had changed, but the feeling hadn't. Beside her, Blackwood checked his rifle for the 5th time, restless. She placed a hand over the barrel, stilling it. You won't beat him with steel alone, she said. You'll need patience, and you'll need to forget yourself. He frowned. Forget myself. She nodded. If you fight for pride, you'll lose. If you fight for glory, you'll miss. The only way to beat him is to fight for something beyond yourself. Her words hung in the roar of the helicopter. Blackwood didn't answer, but she saw the flicker in his eyes. He was listening. They inserted near dusk, dropped at the edge of a ruined village where NATO advisors had been killed days earlier. The air was sharp with smoke, the remnants of burning houses still clinging to the wind. Crouched low, scanning the ridges, every shadow was a threat, every silence a possibility. He's here, she whispered. Blackwood tensed. How can you know? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. She felt it the same way she had years ago in Chechnya, a shift in the air, a gaze pressing from somewhere unseen. Night fell hard, swallowing the ruins in darkness. They took position in the husk of a schoolhouse, shattered windows opening onto the valley. Lay prone, her scope sweeping rooftops, broken chimneys. Nothing. But she knew he was out there, watching, waiting. Blackwood shifted beside her, restless. We can't just sit here. She kept her eye to the scope. That's exactly what we'll do. He wants impatience. He feeds on it. Hours passed. The cold bit into their bones, breath fogging in the air. Silence stretched, long and merciless. Then it came. A glint, barely a shimmer. A reflection off glass nearly a mile away, so faint it could have been nothing. But knew better. Left ridge, she whispered. Blackwood swung his scope, scanning. I don't see. The shot cracked. Glass shattered inches from Blackwood's face, spraying him with shards. He jerked back, swearing, heart pounding. Didn't flinch. She tracked the glint, calm, methodical. Counter-sniper, she whispered. Shift 3 degrees west, elevation down half a mil. He's baiting us. Blackwood's breath shook. How can you? Because I've played this game before. Another shot cracked, closer this time, chipping stone above her head. She didn't move, didn't blink. Blackwood looked at her in disbelief. Why aren't you firing back? Her voice was calm. Because he wants me to. He knows my rhythm, my timing. If I fire now, I lose. We wait. Minutes dragged like hours. Shots came methodically, each one closer, each one meant to unnerve. Blackwood's hands trembled against his rifle, but she was stone. Finally, the rhythm broke, a pause too long. She seized it. Her finger squeezed, the shot tearing through the night. Silence. Then nothing. Blackwood exhaled, shaky. Did you get him? Her scope stayed steady, sweeping, searching. No, I made him move, that's all. And in her chest, a truth she didn't voice. Wasn't just testing them, he was toying with them. When dawn broke, the valley was empty. Tracks in the frost showed where he had shifted positions, always just out of reach, always one step ahead. Blackwood cursed under his breath. We should chased him, finished it. Stood slowly, her body aching from the night's stillness. Her eyes stayed on the scanning. He's not finished, she said. What do you mean? Her voice was quiet, heavy. He never leaves without a message. They found it an hour later, carved into the wall of a burned-out house. Cyrillic letters scratched deep into the stone. Her name. Blackwood stared at it, unsettled. How the hell does he know who you are? Her eyes hardened. Because he's been waiting for me. The wind shifted, cold and sharp across the ruins, and knew the truth she had been avoiding. This wasn't just another mission. This was personal. What do two ghosts say to each other when no one else is listening? The ruins were still. Morning frost glistened on broken beams, on jagged glass that hadn't fallen in the night. Blackwood crouched at the edge of the schoolhouse, his rifle cradled tight, scanning ridges with nervous energy. But she was unnervingly calm, her scope sweeping slowly, methodically, like a pendulum counting down seconds to an end only she could see. Was near. She felt him, not by sound, not by sight, by the weight of his attention. It pressed against her chest like a hand she couldn't brush away. And then it came. The faintest whisper over the radio, scrambled but deliberate. A voice low, accented, cold. Her blood chilled, though her face betrayed nothing. Blackwood jerked toward her. "Who is that?" She didn't answer, she only pressed her headset. "You should have stayed home," his voice continued. "You had your victories, you had your silence. Why come here? Why die here?" Blackwood mouthed the name, eyes widening. Finally spoke, her tone flat, deliberate. "You always did talk too much." A chuckle crackled back, not mocking, almost warm. "I saved your life once. Do you remember Chechnya? I could have ended it then, but I wanted to see how far you would go, how far silence could carry you." Her finger tightened against the trigger. She swept her scope across the ridges, knowing he wouldn't be careless enough to reveal himself while speaking. This was part of his game, rattling her, forcing memory into the present. "You haven't changed," he said softly. "Always cold, always the soldier. Do you even remember their names, the ones you've killed?" A flicker of heat surged in her chest, her journal, the names written in careful hand, the ones crossed out, the ones not. "Yes," she said, her voice steady, "every one." There was a pause on the line, a silence heavy enough to feel deliberate, then his voice lower, almost respectful. "Then you are rarer than I thought." Blackwood ripped off his headset, whisper shouting, "We need to triangulate his signal. We can pin him down." Shook her head. "No, he'll move as soon as we try. He wants us chasing shadows." She was right. The duel wasn't about technology. It was about patience, about who could remain still long enough for the other to crack. The day dragged, sunlight creeping across the valley, shadows shifting like traps. Hours bled into each other. Blackwood grew restless, shifting, muttering, swearing under his breath. Finally he snapped, "This is pointless, he's gone." His voice was sharp, quiet. "No, listen to me. We've been sitting here for 12 hours. He's playing us. He's—" The shot cracked. Stone dust exploded inches from his cheek. He froze, breath catching. Hadn't flinched, her scope already swept, recalculating. "Do you see now?" she whispered. "He's not gone. He's never gone. He's watching every twitch you make, every word you speak. The moment you believe you're safe, that's when you die." Blackwood's face paled, the reality crashing down on him like a wave. Hours passed again, night fell, the valley became a sea of shadows, and still the game went on. At midnight's voice returned, soft as a whisper in a dream. "You should rest. You're not as young as you were. Your hands must ache. Your eyes must blur. I will wait. I always wait." Her jaw clenched. She whispered into the mic, "You're not the only one who can wait." He chuckled again, a low, dark sound. "Ah, but you are the only one who fears time. I have nothing left but this. You still believe in redemption. That makes you weak." She didn't answer, but inside his words struck deeper than she wanted to admit. Redemption. It was the word she never said aloud, but the word that shadowed every mission, every shot. Was that why she was here? To erase him, or to erase herself? The question lingered, unspoken, as the hours bled on. By dawn, frost covered their rifles, their uniforms stiff with cold. Blackwood's teeth chattered, his body aching from stillness, but remained unmoving, her breath slow, measured, eyes fixed through glass. And then, for the first time, she saw him. A flicker of movement on the far ridge, subtle, controlled, a silhouette rising from shadow adjusting a scope. Her heart hammered once, then steadied. Yep. Through the crosshairs she saw his face for the first time in years, weathered, eyes as calm as hers. He looked directly into her scope as if he knew she was there. And he smiled. The shot came an instant later, not his, hers. But he had already moved. The bullet struck stone, sparks flaring. His silhouette vanished. Blackwood cursed, slamming his fist against the ground. Damn it, you had him. Stayed still, her breath sharp, her voice low. No, he had me. He wanted me to fire. He wanted to know if I would break rhythm. And I did. For the first time, doubt flickered in her. He was as patient as she was, as calculating, maybe more. The duel wasn't over. It was only beginning. As they pulled back into the ruins for cover, Blackwood grabbed her arm. How do we beat him? His voice cracked, not with arrogance now, but with fear. She looked at him, her eyes tired but unshaken. We don't beat him by rushing. We don't beat him by outshooting him. We beat him by remembering what he's forgotten. Blackwood frowned. What's that? Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. That silence isn't emptiness, it's purpose, and purpose is stronger than patience. Her words settled over them like frost. Because the truth was clear now. This wasn't just a duel between snipers. It was a duel between ghosts. And only one ghost would walk away. What happens when two ghosts finally stand face to face, knowing only one will leave the valley alive? The ruins were quiet now, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel like peace, the kind that feels like waiting. Blackwood crouched low in the shattered schoolhouse, his face pale, his body taut with fatigue. He had lost the arrogance of a commander, lost the pride of a man who believed himself invincible. What remained was raw, stripped down, human. And she was as she had always been, steady, still, but inside her chest carried a storm. Was close, closer than he had ever been before. The first shot came at dawn, slicing past the window where Blackwood had crouched the night before. Stone shattered, dust clouded the air. Blackwood froze, his breath caught in his throat. Whispered, he's pressing us. Blackwood swallowed hard. Then what do we do? Her answer was simple. We don't play his game. She moved them out, crawling through the rubble, guiding him with silent gestures. They slipped into the belly of the ruined village, past blackened beams and frostbitten alleys, the air stinking of ash and damp earth. Every step was risk, every shadow a possibility. Was everywhere and nowhere. They reached the edge of a collapsed bell tower, its stonework fractured, its roof long gone. Climbed first, silent as breath. Blackwood followed, his hands shaking as he gripped the jagged rock. From the top, the valley spread before them. Ridges layered against the horizon, mist curling in low places. And there, barely visible, a flash of glass. Her scope found him. Prone on a ridge, his body blended into stone and snow, his rifle steady, his eyes behind the glass staring straight into hers. And then, for the first time, he spoke not over a radio, but across the distance, lips moving silently, words only she could read. Finish it. Her finger hovered on the trigger. Breath slowed. The world narrowed into a corridor of glass and steel. But something stopped her. His eyes, calm, steady, not taunting now, not cruel, almost pleading. Was it possible that after years of shadows, years of games, had come here not to win, but to end it? Her chest tightened. Blackwood's whisper hissed behind her, "Take the shot, take it." But she didn't, not yet. She let the silence stretch, heavy, unbearable, because in that silence she realized something. Wasn't just her enemy, he was her reflection. Both of them shaped by decades of war, by ghosts they carried, by choices that carved them hollow. The difference was purpose. He had none left, only the duel. She still had more. Her finger tightened, the rifle bucked once. Through the scope she saw his head snap back. His rifle fell from his hands. His body rolled onto its side, still at last. And then silence. Real silence. Not the heavy silence of waiting, not the cruel silence of taunts, a silence that felt finished. She lowered her rifle slowly, her breath uneven, her chest heavy. Blackwood exhaled in a rush, his voice shaking. "You did it, he's gone." But didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the ridge, on the still figure lying in the snow. She whispered almost to herself, "He was already gone." The words lingered as they exfiltrated, their bodies heavy with exhaustion, their souls heavier still. On the transport home, Blackwood sat across from her, studying her face. He saw lines carved deep by years of service, by memories too heavy to name. He wanted to ask how she carried it. He wanted to ask how she bore the silence. But he didn't, because he already knew the answer. When they landed back at, the men gathered, waiting, whispering. Some wanted details, some wanted stories, but gave none. She walked past them, her rifle slung, her face calm, her silence unbroken. Later in her quarters, she opened her leather journal. She turned to the back, found his name. Yes. Her hand trembled for the first time in years, and slowly, with deliberate care, she drew a line through it. Not with triumph, not with relief, with something quieter, acceptance. She closed the book. Outside, the world carried on. Young men trained on the range, laughter echoing as they mocked and tested one another, unaware of the ghosts who had walked before them. Blackwood stood among them now, different from the man he had been. He spoke less, listened more, and when the others asked about, his voice held a rare weight. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "She doesn't need you to." In the twilight of the range, sat alone, her rifle across her knees. The wind moved gently across her face, whispering patterns only she could hear. She breathed deep, steady, finding again the space between heartbeats. And in that stillness, she remembered the faces of those she had lost. Reed, the convoy in Iraq, countless others. She remembered, too, his final look, his silent plea. For a long moment, she let herself feel it all. The pain, the weight, the ghosts. And then, gently, she set it down. Because some burdens aren't meant to be erased, only carried with dignity. And sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.